Last year was my first garden and I made every mistake. I planted too early, I stunted my plants, you name it, I did it. So today what I want to share with you is 5 of the things that I said to myself, man, I wish I knew that before. So you can skip learning the hard way like I did. Now, let's get into it. Number 1, plant families. Okay, so here's something I wish somebody told me in the beginning. Knowing your plant families makes gardening so much easier. All right, listen. At first, when I was growing few things, I was like, oh, I gotta learn how to do this for this specific plant, and this plant needs different water than this plant, so it can't be in the same bed, and this plant needs different lighting, and blah, blah, blah. I started getting overwhelmed because I thought you had to learn every single plant separately. It wasn't until I realized that they can be grouped into plant families that have the same basic needs that I started having that aha moment, like, oh, that's not so hard. Once you learn one plant family and their basic needs, you kind of unlock the cheat code for the rest. All right, so what are some plant families? Alliums, that's onions and garlics and shallots. Nightshades are tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and even potato. I find that one to be very interesting. Brassicas, they are broccoli, cabbage, kale, and arugula. And then the cucurbits, that's your cucumbers, your melons, your squash, and your pumpkins. Now, those families have more things in it than that. I just figured I'd list a few. Like I said, they all have similarities. So for example, nightshades, they like warm weather, where brassicas, they don't. Section 2, insect breeding cycles. Okay, all right, listen to me. The reason I wish that I knew this is because there's been times where your plant looks awesome, and then the next morning you go out there and it's basically dead. And you're like, what in the world just happened? Well, surprise! It was some sort of insect. I'm in Massachusetts, Zone 6B. One of the worst offenders in a lot of gardens are squash vine borers. What these little guys do is they lay eggs at the base of your zucchini or squash. The larvae actually tunnel inside and eat it from the inside out. So you'll be looking at your plant one day like, oh, it's doing great. And the next day the plant is knocked over and is dying. And you're like, what the heck? Well, the call was coming from inside the house. You can save it though with a little bit of surgery. You can kind of slice it open and take out that larva, wrap around where you sliced it open, stake it back up if needed, and hopefully you caught it in time and you'll be able to save its life. But here's the thing about them. Pests have breeding cycles. So if you're planting too early, too late, or just in general at the wrong time, you're basically setting out an all-you-can-eat buffet for these guys. So what's the solution? Well, there's a few solutions. One of them is bug netting. But another one of them is literally to just wait them out. So instead of trying to get a head start on your garden by sowing things indoors and then bringing them out after your last frost date, just go ahead and wait. Maybe transplant them in July instead of May. And by that time, most borers are done breeding for the year. So you'll still get a harvest a little later, but you won't have the heartbreak. So whatever pest you're having an issue with, look up their breeding cycle and see when it is that they're done breeding and try to plant accordingly. Section 3, temperature. Now I'm talking about air and soil, guys, okay? And plants care about it way more than I realized. When I first started gardening, I had no clue. I had no idea that there was cool-loving crops versus warm-loving crops, shade-loving crops versus sun-loving crops. I didn't know. I just didn't know these things. So here I am trying to grow lettuce and kale in the middle of August. It just doesn't work. Once you realize which types of crops like what type of temperature, then you'll be able to plant them at the right time, which is best for them to grow strong. Mostly on the back of your seed packets, you'll see days to maturity. So if it's, say, for example, 60 days to maturity, that's 2 months. And if you know that they like it in the cold, Say that means you need to harvest in November, and you know that the days to maturity are 60 days. That means you want to be planting that out in September. And you can do the same thing in the beginning of the year as well. If you know it's a cool weather crop and you don't want it to be still sitting in the ground once the sun starts getting hot for the summer, then go ahead and figure out when that date is for you that it starts to be too hot. Say that would be June 15th. And it's got, say, 60 days to maturity, go ahead and plant those seeds April 15th. You might have to start those ones indoors, but that's when you would do it. This is where your zones come into play as well. Frost dates. You can figure out what your frost dates are. It's super simple to look up online. But it's not just the air that matters, it's the soil that matters too. Think of it like this. When you're in a pool that's 70 degrees and you're in air that's 70 degrees, that pool feels a lot cooler to you than the air does, right? Of course it does. It's because it's a much better conductor. The air is thin, the pool is thick in comparison. Well, air is thin and soil is thick. So it's going to be affecting those roots. So if you have a heat-loving crop, but the soil is only 50 degrees, it's not really going to like that too much. And certain families will stop producing altogether if they're not within their sweet spot of their temperature. For example, nightshades, if the air gets to be above 90 degrees, they might just drop all of their flowers. And that means their fruit, guys. So you might want to think about how to keep them in their butter zone. They don't like anything below 70 and above 85, they don't really love that either. 90 plus, they're going to start dropping their flowers, especially if it's going to be for a few days in a row. Perhaps think about some shade cloth. Number 4, hardening off. Okay, this sounds weird. I get it. I thought it was weird too. At first, I was like, what could that possibly even mean when I first heard the term without context? Harden them off? Like, what? I couldn't understand what that could possibly mean. But now that I've made this mistake, I totally get why it's called hardening them off. When you plant your seeds indoors, no matter how fancy of a grow light you have, it's not the sun, guys. It's just not the sun. And it's not going to mimic the outdoor environment at all. So what you got to do is a process called hardening off. Right before you're ready to get those plants that you sowed indoors out into your garden, what you want to do is every day for 5 to 7 days, you just want to bring those plants outside in the sun for about an hour, maybe a little bit longer every single day. By the last day, you should be able to leave them out for several hours and they should be just fine. If they're not, if they're wilting, if they look like they're dying, it's probably because they're not hardened off yet. So start at an hour and then maybe go to an hour and a half and then maybe 2 hours, something like that. Do you want to know how I know about this one? I've killed so many plants because I got way too excited and I had all of my seeds and I saw my last frost date, and for some reason I thought that was like, following an absolute guide. And just because the guide said the last frost date was May 17th, then it was definitely May 17th. And all of a sudden you get a weird 80-degree day and the sun is just too bright for them and they die. Or you put them outside and you leave them overnight and it's not a very hot day, but then it gets way too cold at night and then they die. The outside and the inside are just not the same. You've got to give your plants a chance to get used to their new environment. They will be such strong plants if you do this. Number 5, and then we're on to the bonus. Sensitive roots, and by that I mean transplanting. Some plants don't mind at all if you transplant them. And what I mean by that is you sow them indoors in some sort of tray or cell or pot, and then you take them out of that once they're big enough and you put them in the ground or in a raised bed or in a bigger container. Some plants, they don't care. Do whatever you want. They'll be just fine. Other plants do not like their roots touched at all, and they're finicky and they'll be stunted and or die. Things in the Cucurbitaceae family, so cucurbits, cucumbers, squash, melons, they absolutely do not like it because you 100% can transplant these. If you are going to transplant, I suggest doing it in more of like a cell or a small pot. So that way when you take it out of that pot, you don't disturb the roots at all. It kind of comes out as one like single unit. The soil the roots, it all comes out together. And then when you transplant it, make a hole big enough to put that entire unit right there, right in the center. And then cover it up with your soil, and there you go. That way you didn't disturb the roots at all. Then there are other things that need to be direct sown. And these are the things that you eat the part that actually grows underground. For example, carrots, radishes, or beets. So wherever you're gonna have them in the garden, put the seeds right there in the garden. Do not transplant those ones. Okay guys, and now we're on to the bonus. And this one I'm still learning because for some reason I can make the same mistakes over and over and over. And this one is viable seeds. What do I mean by viable seeds? Well, even just this year, I did it my first year, I did it my second year, and now I'm doing it again this year. These carrot seeds were old. So because I see over here, the ones I planted a week before I planted those, only 2 have come up. I bought seeds that were too old, and that means they're not viable anymore. They did not germinate. So just make sure that when you're buying seeds for the year that you're in. So look at the date on the seed packet. I tend to try to stay away from things that aren't actual seed packets because actual seed packets have information on them, including the date. I recently got from Amazon some seeds that came in like a little plastic baggie with a piece of paper, and I was like, what? What is this? It didn't have information on it. It was just kind of like a baggie stapled to a receipt. And I was like, come on, that's not what I wanted. And of course, yeah, none of those seeds germinated. Not a single one. I would say seeds can last for a couple of years. The germination rate will go down the further out the harvest date is. So if those seeds are from 2 years ago, you might have like a 20 to 50% germination rate. If they're from last year, maybe a 50% germination rate. And if they're from this year, maybe like an 80 to 100% germination rate. Now, those numbers I'm just pulling out from my own experience. Those are not numbers I found anywhere. I'm just saying my own experience from sowing seeds that were 2 years old. That's what I got from it. So make sure your seeds are new. And the list does not end here. I actually have 2 more videos. That's right, 6 more things that I wish that I knew, mistakes that I personally made that I want to share with you. Go ahead and watch those videos right here.